Hello and welcome. This is Wise Woman Television and my name is Errity Green and this is Spiritual Truth Tea. So this series is all about getting real and sharing a more broad and expansive perspective and awareness of the things that are happening in the real world. So I take current events and I offer the truth tea or the spiritual truth tea regarding these situations and circumstances. That way we are looking at it from a truer place as opposed to our own conditioning, our own history, our own programming, and our own emotional reactivity. So this week, what I want to talk about is all the shitstorm that's happening on the world stage and the collective reality. We've had a number of things occur and things continue to unfold that seem apocalyptic, not so fun. And if you're anything like me, you are recognizing the greater good and the benefit in all of this. I should take a moment to remind you to like and subscribe, because liking ensures that other people receive this message and that you're sharing the wealth that you've been given and gifted, and subscribing ensures a commitment to yourself that you continue to show up every time a notification comes up. You can return to yourself and your greater spiritual growth and to your spiritual path, life path and journey. So there's that. So we're seeing a lot of stuff happening on the world stage. If this is landing for you, there's another relevant video you can watch on this channel that I just recorded and will be publishing today as well, which is what you need to know. And it's for this week, which is the week of June, the final week of June going into the beginning of July 2020. So you'll want to look at that video too. If what we talk about here lands for you, it's what you need to know right now. Now for today's video on Spiritual Truth Tea, I want to talk about all the things that have been happening. We know about the sea crisis and everything that came through with the pandemic in 2020. So if you're watching this in the future, this is the time that this is being filmed. And social unrest to a degree that we haven't seen in a generation, if not many decades or more. So we are seeing a lot of things come to the surface. And that is what I want to share today, is we're seeing things come to the surface so that they can be shifted, so that they can be released, so they can be changed. So everything that's happening on the world stage that seems very scary or that seems ugly, these are all things that are opportunities and catalysts. So we are being given the opportunity to change as a result of what we are seeing. Now, this isn't an opportunity to continue in the same old status quo, blame and shame and public humiliation rituals that humanity has engaged in for eons. It's the same story. We can keep telling that story in new forms with new characters and new roles, or we can shift our consciousness and actually make a real, genuine, sincere change on our planet. So everything that's happening with the pandemic and the social unrest and the very real racism and all of the derivatives of racism, so recognizing discrimination and prejudice and recognizing the plight of many of our minority groups. And I put that in quotes because we call them minority groups, and yet are they really the minority anymore when it comes to our population, especially in the Western world? The plight of even women. I mean, we're really starting to see with Me Too and all of that over the past couple of years, so much is coming to the surface, and a lot of this truth is ugly and a lot of this truth is brutal. And yet, when this truth comes before us and is manifested in whatever way in our physical and collective realities, that's our opportunity to step back and first look at ourselves before we engage in an emotional response or reaction, before we engage in blame and shame and do the same old runaround humans have been doing for eons, which will just perpetuate more of the same, more racism, more discrimination, more prejudice, more us versus them, more groupthink, more mob mentality, more violence, more aggression, more anger, more upset, more unrest, which then will lead to other things, war, political factions, so on and so on and so on, right? So we don't want more of that. So our opportunity here, and that's the truth tea that's being delivered today, is not to do any of that, and instead to back up and first look at ourselves. Our opportunity here is to see within ourselves if we have a reaction of fear, if we have a reaction of anger, if we have a reaction of aggression, all of these are valid responses. None of them are wrong, right? However, if we want to make true, real, genuine change in our own lives and out in the physical reality, we step back, we look at ourselves, and we ask ourselves, what is the root of this? You know, is this a wound of rejection and abandonment? Is this a wound that has been passed on for generations? What is the wound for you uniquely? Then what is the wound for your family and for your culture and for your lineage? And then what is the wound collectively for humanity? And what is the greater wound from there, right? We can take this deeper and go big or as small as we desire, as our process brings to us. Because what you receive is going to be different than what someone else receives when they do this processing. And the whole point of this is just to shine the light of awareness as to where we hook in or engage to a particular event that's happening, so we can recognize our own participation, our own reactivity, and any programming or patterning or subconscious influence or any wounding that's being activated and ignited through what we're seeing. And that's all we do. We become aware of it. We don't have to go into spiritual surgery or a spiritual reconstruction or psychoanalysis of ourselves until kingdom come. We simply become aware of our reactions, of our natural response patterns, where we stand, what we believe in, what is important for us, where we can breathe some flexibility and inner freedom into all these tight and scared and angry places, where we can grieve some of our pain, let some air in, open up the windows, give all parts of ourselves and our mind, body, spirit some fresh air. Once we do that and we're in an aware place and we have contacted or connected with a greater, more expansive consciousness, then we can go out there in the world and make real change by taking new action and making new choices. So everything that's happening right now on the world stage that appears very scary is a purge of all of the old and the status quo and more of the same and the things we don't like and the things we don't agree with and the things that don't align with our true value system. And we're being given an opportunity to notice and then to say, oh, I don't love that. That's not at all what I want for my life or my family or my reality or this planet or all people. I don't want that at all. That's the first step. Having that awareness. There's so much that's coming up right now that we haven't been aware of before that is new for us. And so perhaps in many cases, some people have been aware, right? But this is the first time collectively that everyone is becoming aware of all the tragedies and atrocities that are happening behind the scenes and underneath the hood. And now we're looking at what's really going on. We're looking at the real deal, right? We've been able to open the hood and be like, oh, this is the underbelly of humanity. This is the underbelly of capitalism and materialism. This is the underbelly of Western culture. And you know what? It's kind of ugly and I kind of don't like it. Or maybe I know I don't like this. And if that's the case, we need to start looking within ourselves to see where we are perpetuating and participating in these old patterns and old systems and these cultural agreements and collective agreements that we've made together to create all of this. And we take responsibility in our own lives to the extent that we can. For some things, we aren't directly responsible, but for most of this, we are indirectly responsible. So perhaps we might say that we are not racist, which you hear a lot of people say. Thankfully, so many people are becoming aware and evolving into a greater awareness of themselves and how they've participated or perpetuated racism or sexism or misogyny. Perhaps you aren't directly perpetuating or participating in these systems, and yet, more often than not, I would say all the time, each of us are indirectly participating and perpetuating in the systems and this culture that perpetuates the realities of racism, social injustice, and so on and so forth, right? So the example that I like to give, and I give this one because it's something that I can relate to, and it's an easy metaphor that just came to me. So I share this, and I used to share this when we had conversations, when the Me Too conversations were going on, and there was a lot of talk on sexism and misogyny and sexual harassment. A lot of people were saying, oh, well, I'm not a misogynist, or I'm not sexist, or of course I agree with women's empowerment, but I'm not a feminist, all those things. And what I like to share is, so we might not be sexist, but are we willing to explore the reality or the possibility that going to Hooters for some delicious wings, I've done it, is perpetuating sexism and misogyny? And you might ask yourself, or you might even be offended, how dare she suggest something so ridiculous or obscene, or I've been to Hooters and I am not sexist. And yet, if it participates at all in the exploitation and objectification of women, that in fact would perpetuate sexism. So even something as benign or as harmless as Hooters, a delicious wing place, and for a lot of people is their weekly rendezvous to watch the game, which seems as innocent as ever. If it perpetuates the exploitation and objectification of women, it is in fact perpetuating and participating in a system of sexism. So looking at those sort of dark, ugly truths that none of us want to look at, and that's where racism and all of these other isms are very much active and beneath the surface and running the show. And while we're seeing all these manifestations of truth being purged and revealed, and it seems really ugly, in fact, this is just our opportunity to look under the hood, to see what's going on, not just collectively, but then within ourselves, and to say, how am I participating and perpetuating this? And then to even go further and to say, where am I hooking into this and allowing myself to be affected in a way that perhaps I don't have to choose it anymore. I don't have to choose anger. I don't have to choose pain. I don't have to choose disempowerment. I don't have to choose victimization, right? And so we as an individual, we have an opportunity to also develop more sovereignty or unfuckwithability, meaning not just in my face and in my mask and in my facade, I act like I'm unfuckable and so sovereign, but to the depth and all through the layers of my mind, body, spirit, and being, I've become unfuckwithable and sovereign because I've released all of my attachment to how someone treats me or what they say or what they do or what the world says. So we can take this as deep as possible, and that is the work of what is happening right now and everything that's being released and everything that's being purged. The opportunity and the catalyst here is to dive in that deep, to address it at a socio-cultural level, to address it as an individual, and to go even into our own psycho-spiritual experience, our mind, body, spirit, and recognize where we are hooking in, where it's no longer become about the thing itself, it's become about our relationship to that thing. So how can we address that relationship so that way we can free ourselves from allowing it to give us pain, from allowing it to give us grief, from allowing it to have a say in our reality? Because as each of us become totally sovereign beings, we are in a freer, more liberated, and clear space to not only experience love and peace and joy and bliss within our own experience, but to then share that with others and create that on a collective reality level with all the people here on this planet. So that is the opportunity now, with everything that's being purged, with all the ugly things that we're seeing, the underbelly that has been revealed. The opportunity here is for individual change, to take responsibility, not just in how we act in our everyday lives, but a little bit at least of a deeper exploration to see where we might be participating in these old systems and where we have hooked in to these old responses, even generational responses or wounding patterns that keep us hooked into an old pattern and paradigm that we no longer desire to be a part of. We don't have to say yes to what the world delivers to us or shows us. So that is Spiritual Truth Tea for this week, and I encourage you to check out next week's episode or the next one that will be updated, and I will see you then.